Good morning, everyone. It's Vav Tevet. We're going to do now Parshat, the Bat Ayin, as we did last week, started last week. We're going to do Parshat Vayechi, and we're going to do the Torah that starts with, in the Bat Ayin, Parshat Vayechi, it starts with Hayasvu V'Gidu Lachem, and that's the pasuk that really, that's where Yaakov Avinu is giving the brachot to all of his sons, and the Rashi there says he was going to give the sons to tell them what's predicting what was going to happen in the future. We are going to see a new unique approach to what the Bat Ayin has to say about it, and we'll start with the words of the Bat Ayin. So it says it's a little bit of a longer piece. We'll try to get through the whole thing. So it says, so it's about Yaakov Avinu is telling him that right before he gives his brachot, he's going to tell them, he's giving them the aspects of each one of their names, the brachot, and he's going to give each one of them a little bit of what's going to happen down in the line. So he says, as the Bat Ayin always likes to say, is how do we learn something? What's the musar? What can we learn in a practical way? What can we learn from this pasuk? Rashi, in the beginning of this parsha, it says that why is this parsha closed, meaning that there's no gap between the previous parsha and this parsha, Parshat Vayechi. And so Rashi says that it's because that Yaakov Avinu was passing away, and therefore we didn't want to, and his eyes were closing, and so therefore we did, and because the Rashi continues to say, this beginning really is this the beginning of the shi'bud, the slavery, and since that all of these reasons are sad, therefore we need to understand. The Bat Ayin is asking is why do we have to understand why this parsha is called a stuma, which means it's closed up. He says, how do we understand that? He says, how does Rashi get to the understanding that the fact that the parsha is closed hints to the idea that Yaakov's eyes were closed? Right? He says, because if we look at a cloth, we look at a piece of parchment, right? It's the Torah is the light of the Torah is there's more light from the Torah itself and the black ink of the Torah on the cloth. So he says the opposite. He says when we have more ink on the page, right, because there's no break in between the different parshiot, that provides us with a little bit more light, because the light of the words of the letters of the Torah provide us with more light. So the fact that it's a closed parsha should actually be to the advantage of the parsha, not to the disadvantage, which is what Rashi seems to imply. Kasher. Right? Rashi says that it seems like the eyes of Bnei Israel and the eyes of Yaakov were kind of closing from sadness and from tears, but we should be saying the opposite, right? That's exactly what he says here. It should be more of a different kind of approach. And so he says, he says, when it says Vayechi Yaakov, that's where Rashi says that the eyes of Bnei Israel were crying from, and they're closed. But it should really say that idea where when Yaakov actually passes away, and shouldn't be here when Bnei Israel were beginning the galut, because here, in fact, it's a bracha filled with light on the cloth, the light based on the letters of the cloth, which represent light of Torah. So, in order to answer, he says, so he says that in order for us to understand this whole point, he says at the beginning, we have to understand what the whole purpose of creation was. It was really to include, he says, the whole purpose of creation is to, the idea is the knowledge, knowledge, which includes Chesed and Geula, and that's based on the idea that is brought down in the Zohar Kadosh and its time chart in the Ezachaim. He says that basically dot includes, as we know, dot includes Chokhmah, Chesed and Geula, and together the Chesed and Geula together bring up a dot. Lachnis or b'toch choshev means we have to infuse light into the darkness that is the world. Our job is to increase light. And as it says, he brings a pasuk from Tehillim, Kufiyud Bet, Tehillim Kufiyud Bet, pasuk Dal Zarach Choshech or Laisharim. Right, and the light Zarach B'Choshech. He brought light that through the darkness, or Laisharim to those people who are Perush Laisharim Zorech or B'Toch B'Chnas Choshech. He says exactly the Perush, exactly the explanation. He says that for the people who are straight and follow the right path, he brings a light rises, the sun rises, or the light rises, even in the darkness. So he says that they turn all their inclinations and anything that might be all their thoughts that may not be necessarily the best ones. And he says that the whole idea is that the people who are following the straight path is that they turn them into kedusha, and they bring them towards, and they use them that any inclinations or any leanings that we might have that would be otherwise physical or mundane, we are able to somehow turn them into the people who are straight, understand that through those things we're able to direct them and channel them towards Hashem. And that's exactly what we know. There's a concept called sweetening the judgments. So he says this is exactly what it means when it says choshech and vo, darkness and uncertainty and disarray, is what we have in these aspects and these characteristics. We have characteristics and our leanings towards things that are not for Hashem. So he says this is why Chazal, the Chachamim, what the Chachamim did was they said to take our mundane, our lusts, our desires, and channel them towards things that are kedusha. We can either, many of the desires we have opposite versions of them, which can be used for good. But we just have to learn to use them and instill light in them. Right, to come back to the doing tshuva for him, according to the Bat Ayin, is to bring them back to their kedusha source, to their holy source. And he says by doing that, by taking those energies and those actions that are not necessarily positive and channeling them towards positive energy, positive ways, then we are able to do is what he calls them tshuva. He says this is the whole idea of the creation, is to turn darkness into light. Rashi שאדם תוהה משתומם על בוב שבה. פירוש שאדם תוהה ונתחרט על בחינת בוהו, בחינת חושך, שממידותיו הוא מכניס בהם בחינת אור, בחינת תשובה, ובזהו ממתיק הגבורות. So he says, now he instills, in classic Bat Ayin fashion, he takes the idea and brings it back into the pasuk, and in this case, he's bringing it back into the case of Bereshit bara Elohim, and he says that a person sometimes focuses too much on the uncertainty or the disarray or the unorganization that might be going on, and he gets focused on the darkness of a person may get focused on the darkness that exists in his actions, and then what he does is he instills and infuses light into them, and therefore by doing that he sweetens the harsh judgment that might be on him, and he's actually doing tshuva. By doing that, you bring light and you're bringing shefa, you're bringing bracha down from Hashem. That's what we just said before. Geula, מאמר כתוב, הן גאלתי אתכם אחרית כראשית. פירוש שיהיה אחרית בחינת החושך, בחינת גשמיות, כראשית רצה לומר שיהיה בהם בחינת אור, בחינת קדושה, שנקרא בחינת ראשית. And he brings the Bat Ayin at the end, says this is not only was it the purpose of creation, which is to infuse light in the darkness, but it's also, he says, this will be the same idea when the time of the Geula, and he quotes the pasuk that we read in on Musaf on Shabbat, which is called Kedushat Keter, which is the Hasidim say that, or Hasidim and Nusach Sfarad say that, and Dota Mizrach say on Shabbat. It says Hein Galti Yatchem Acharit Kireshit. The end will be like the beginning, meaning that the end, which is the darkness, which will have, and before that, he says the Acharit, the Choshech, which is really the Gashmiut, the mundane, he says, will be like the Reshit, which is at the beginning, which is our job is to infuse it with light. So he's saying is that the whole idea, concept of idea and concept of acharit at the end of days will also be for us to infuse light, and that's our job nowadays as we get closer to the Geula, is to infuse light. Now it gets back to Yaakov Avinu. He says this is exactly what Yaakov Avinu wanted to do and to instill within his children after he passes away, that they will have the Or Hashem continuously. He says we need to infuse light, if you instill light with everything that we do, any part of the mundane that we have. And this is exactly what he says in the pasuk that we introduced the whole idea, this drush on, as Rashi says, Bikesh legalot haketz, hainu b'shebikesh sheyeh habechina Geula ratzah lomar b'chinat or hagilui b'tmidut bilti achoshech tchila. So what Rashi is saying is that he wanted, the Bat Ayin is explaining, Rashi says, is that Yaakov wanted to do is that he wanted to say that at the end of days, is that with the Geula will be, is that there will always be light. In other words, constant light without the idea of having darkness first. Gam kates hu milshon sof tachlit, right? We know the kates can mean also the ending. And so he says, Zev tachlit bria. He says the idea is that that Yaakov Avinu wanted to do is says, I want to get you to the end. I want to get you to the point where there'll only be light and no darkness. And this is what So he says the Vagida, he plays a nice play on words here, and he says that the Agida is, as we know in the Gemara in Daf Shabbat, Daf Kufdal, it says Gimel Daled, Gomel Dalim. Gimel Daled, the word Gimel Daled, the letters Gimel Daled, which spell God, are Rashi Tevot for Gomel Dalim. That's based on Gemara. He says the whole idea of Gemilut Chesed, a person who helps those people who are unfortunate, right, is that he brings them and elevates them, those either the people or their actions or the ideas, or in this case, he says, characteristics of Chosed, dark, someone who's going through tough times, and he elevates them and instills light with them and infuses them and inspires them, right? That's the point here. V'agida lachem is that he's instilling light. He helps those people who are unfortunate. So what the Bat Ayin is saying is V'agida is that the source of Agida, meaning the shorish, the root of Agida is God, Gimel Dal, which is Gomel Dali, means that I want to help you instill light into those moments, into that moment which might be darkness, which is right before the Galut. I want to instill and tell you what's going to happen in the Geula, in the time of the Geula, so that way I can instill light then, I can still in light now, so that would during the time that might be dark. Moshe Perosh Rashi al Vayikra Moshe Bechinat Or She'ir Bechinat Acharit Bechinat Choshech Shehu Sof Kol Medragot. So he's saying is, as it's Asher Yikra Etchem B'Charit Hayamim, he says that the word Yikra is a sense of love, and we know that from the pasuk of Vayikra in about 2 months. We'll see Vayikra, and it says there, Rashi says Vayikra El Moshe Bechinat Or. Right there, Rashi says he brings a sense of love. Yikra means that you sense of love. He brings them together with a sense of love. And that sense of love is that he's instilling light. He's bringing acharit after the acharit, which is the darkness. I want to yikara lechem acharit. So he says, "Et asher yikra etchem b'acharit." I'm going to infuse a sense of love and light. That's going to happen in the moment of darkness, right? Because he's reading the pasuk literally here. He says, or linearly, he says, "Et asher yikra," the sense of love and light, b'acharit, in that moment of darkness. Ratzalomar sheYaakov bikesh yeh bechinat or bechinat Geula b'tmidut v'galui. So he's saying is, I want to give you the light now, so that way there won't be a need for darkness. This is exactly the point here, is that he's saying is that unfortunately Yaakov was trying to tell Bnei Israel what's going to happen, tell his children what's going to happen in the end of days, but he said, we know that he tried to do that. Rashi says that nistami menu, it was closed from him. That's why we started with what Rashi said. Rashi said it was hidden from him. That's why this Parshat Vayechi skin is stuma, it's closed, right? In other words, it's not possible to reveal only light without darkness first. That's what the Bat Ayin is trying to teach us here, is that the darkness that we need the darkness in order for us to, the light that has to come after darkness. We can't just have light only or in darkness only. The darkness has to come, the light has to come after the darkness. הכתוב יקבצו וישמעו אל ישראל אביכם. אמר שבתחילה צריך להיות בחינת יעקב, בחינה קטנה. And so he says, this is why it says Yaakov, it says, come together, right? And he says that Yaakov, which we know is a smaller version of the name, is not Yaakov, his name is also Yisrael. But it says so first it starts with Yaakov, and then it goes to Yisrael. So here the Bat Ayin is saying is that first we have to be in an aspect or consider ourselves in the state of Yaakov, a state of low, state of that's based on the Zohar, that says that that Yaakov is considered a lower level, and Yisrael, his second name, is considered a higher level, right? So Yaakov is not complete, so that we have to first be at the sense of Yaakov, darkness. Greatness and light. Yisrael meramez b'china zo she'ir or b'toch hachoshech. Yisrael gematria or choshech. Ratzon amar sheish gilui or b'choshech. So what he's saying is that first we have to be at a state of status of Yaakov, a status of darkness, a little bit lower level, and then we can be a status of Yisrael. Yisrael is greatness, it's a light, and Yisrael actually hints to us, he says that it reminds us of the light that's within the darkness, because Yisrael, as he says, is Or Choshech. The gematria of Or Choshech is Yisrael, and that's based on Em Libina, a sefer called Em Libina, and it says that Mikiminyan Or Choshech is who gematria Yisrael, and that's what he says. Also, he explains it. Bat Ayin also explains it later on in Parshat Fukat. He mentions the same idea that Bechinat Yisrael is Zarach or Choshech, and he says that Or Leisharim. And even in darkness, in the point of darkness, there's also a great moment of Shekhinah, a great revelation of the presence of Hashem. Now he says that based on all what we just said, what we want to summarize, Yaakov was trying to kind of jump the steps. Yaakov was trying to say, I want to tell you what's going to happen at the end of days, where what I'm trying to tell you is that we just need light. We just need a lot of light. But Yaakov was skipping the step that in order to have light, we need to have darkness. Right? And just like what did we do in the time of creation? Hashem wants to infuse light into the creation, into the darkness. And Yaakov was just saying we just need to have the light. And he was trying to skip a little bit of a step. And that's why it says, that's why now we can understand what Rashi was saying is Betuv Tam V'dat Bezrat Hashem, Yaakov Kasher Hayachai Hayam Mamshich Levanav B'chinat Or B'gilui B'tmidut. So this is exactly the point, and this kind of summarizes what we're about to get to. And he says that Rashi was saying, he was saying is Yaakov, when he was alive, when Yaakov Avinu, the last of the forefathers, was alive, he was able to do is bring down light, constant light at all moments, and reveal it to us. So Yaakov was able to bring this whole moment, this great light, and have this clarity. Salamor Goshen, Goshen, the Milashon Nigash. Last week, Bnei Israel moved to Eretz Goshen. So the Bat Ayin is saying here is that Goshen is the same letters as Nigash, and Nigash means it's approachable, meaning that there was a sense of closeness, a sense of clarity, a sense of vision that Yaakov was able to instill in Bnei Israel while they were in Mitzrayim. But Od Goshen Gematria Orso. He says that also Goshen is the same Gematria as Orso. So they were able to bring light into all the aspects of everything that they were doing. Even during moments of darkness, they were bringing light. There was just constant sense of light. And then he says, at the end of last week, at the end of this week's, and the last week's Parshat, they were a great number of people. They were just multiplied, and he says because the light was so great, the light that was so great that Yaakov Avinu brought into the world, it was just literally an infinite. That's why it was a stuma, meaning a closed parsha. Right? There was no end. There was a constant continuation between all the letters of the Torah until Vayechi Yaakov, meaning that even though Yaakov did experience many moments of darkness, there was a constant sense of stream of light that was happening the entire life of Yaakov. Right? Only after Yaakov passed away, then the Torah portion opens up. It opens up a little bit. Or that's when the light stopped. So he says that's the moment. At that moment, when Yaakov Avinu passed away, the light that the forefathers brought into this world ended, and therefore that's when Bnei Israel's eyes, which were based on what Rashi says, that their eyes closed. Bnei Israel's eyes closed. So literally, you would say their eyes closed from all the tears. But this is why Rashi brings it at the point when Yaakov is about to, at the beginning, before, as opposed to when Yaakov dies itself, because their eyes closed. Their eyes, it says, that's when their eyes, excuse me, the eyes opened up. Their eyes opened up again because they realized that the light was diminishing. The light was there. Their eyes were diminishing. Their light was diminishing just like their eyes were diminishing when Yaakov passed away, because the light, the source of light that Yaakov was closing. It says this is why the Rashi says the second Pirush is that Yaakov wanted to reveal the ending of days, what was going to happen, and he was unable to, nistam, like the word satum, which is closed. Right? This is why Yaakov Avinu wanted to just pass on this light, the source of light, and then what would happen is if it was possible for that to happen, then the galut would not happen, and that's why Rashi says when he's mimenu. I mean, it was unfortunately Yaakov was not able to. He was prevented from doing it. Right. That's why there was a constant. It was closed up until Viyechi Yaakov. So again, classic Bat Ayin style. He finishes with a bracha. He finishes with something that we should learn from. But what he's trying to say, what Yaakov is trying to say, is that he was trying to reveal. And if I had to summarize the entire portion that we just went through, that the Bat Ayin is trying to teach he was trying to teach the world what it is, what's the source of Geula is this light that he brought down. And the source of our job and role and responsibility in this life is to bring light, infuse light, even in the darkest moments. Even in those moments of difficulty, our job is to see the light and be that source of light, even those moments, in whatever we can do. And by doing that, we are continuously taking our characteristics, which might have opposites. Sometimes our characteristics are good and positive, and sometimes our characteristics have the opposite effect. And so what we have to do is constantly refine our actions and constantly refine our characteristics to be sources of light and sources of kedusha. And that by doing that, we're not only doing tshuva for ourselves, we're also actually instilling more light into the world. By doing that, we're bringing the Geula closer. Another idea, which is not in this, we didn't choose this piece. Another idea that he brings, the Bat Ayin brings, is that it says that so here, another point that the Bat Ayin mentioned is that the idea is he'asvu. The idea is that the Bat Ayin wants us to bring is the sense of asifa, togetherness. That Yaakov, in similar, that what he does is that he instills every person's. In the idea of that we're supposed to instill light into this world is that what do? We take each person's light, each person's characteristics, every one of the Shvatim's characteristics and their moments of light, and taking those moments of light and bringing them towards a unified and a achdut. That the idea here of the Esvu V'agid Lachem means that he says you have to unify. Take all that which is your characteristic and the next person and every one of the Shvatim's characteristics, and by doing and bringing them together, Asfu, join, come together, right? By doing that, he says that it's not coming just from the fact that I just accept your light and my light and everyone's light, but rather we have to recognize that every one of them, every person, every one of the Shvatim has a light that is necessary, and we can't just say, okay, I'm letting you in. Right? It's that every one of them, he says that the shleimut, the wholeness of the the wholeness of the nation is by everyone's light being able to shine forth. It's not just saying is that you have it and I'm not letting you in or I'm letting you in, but rather each one of them has a strength and a mission. And by putting all our missions together, then we can actually bring the Geula together. Shabbat Shalom, everyone.